When was asbestos banned? Go ahead and answer in the comments below. Welcome to the Shikama Live Show with your host, Shikama. If anyone is qualified to talk about asbestos, it should be banned in the U.S., it's retired aerospace engineer and businessman Paul Ziegel. His life, work, and medical history encompasses America's deadly legacy of asbestos. And with asbestos imports and use continuing in the United States to this day, his story is a cautionary tale of future generation. Ziegelbaum, now 65, was first exposed to asbestos when he was a toddler from the dust-covered work clothes his father brought home from his job as a maintenance worker in Los Angeles in 1970. While a student at the California Institute of Technology, Ziegelbaum worked as a technician in Pasadena, and his first job was to insulate a steel tank with asbestos cloth. Another exposure occurred 6 years later when he repaired wall damage in the 1950s home that he and his wife bought. And then in 1978, Ziegelbaum received a significant exposure to asbestos while working in a power plant operated by an Oregon utility. In 2004, Ziegelbaum, who lives in Santa Rosa, California, was diagnosed with peritoneal mesothelioma, which has since spread to his chest. He survived 4 surgeries and 3 chemotherapy regimes, and he is now undergoing immunotherapy treatment. He's became an indefatigable advocate for asbestos victims and an outspoken critic of asbestos remaining legal in the United States. That's right, asbestos was never banned in the US. So for everybody who wrote 1970 or 1975 or 1972, you're all wrong. In fact, even with some sort of regulations that we're talking about banning asbestos, the production of asbestos products had been so widespread that many warehouses, even with the regulations being talked about, still crossed the border into the United States and were still being used 100% even throughout the 80s. He says, "I think it's disgusting," with urgency when asked his thoughts on asbestos remaining legal in the United States, despite an overwhelming scientific consensus that asbestos is a carcinogen. "It makes me sad for the country. Asbestos sickens and kills, and we do far too little to regulate it. It's reprehensible that Congress has allowed the man-made asbestos crisis to continue," says Linda Reinstein, president of the Asbestos Disease Awareness Organization, ADAO, which represents asbestos victims. Each year, up to 15,000 Americans die from preventable mesothelioma and other asbestos-caused diseases, and imports still continue. Adds Alec Formuzis of the Environmental Working Group, EWG, in Washington. The fact that more than 50 nations have banned asbestos and the United States has not shows just how powerful the asbestos industry has been over the years. It also sends a signal to other countries that have not taken steps to restrict or ban asbestos that they can continue to go on producing and exporting it around the world, including to ports in the U.S. Asbestos importation still strong in the U.S. Indeed, though asbestos hasn't been mined in the United States since 2002 and its use has declined significantly, American business still legally import, use, and sell both raw asbestos and products made with it, according to interviews with scientists, government officials, statistics compiled by the U.S. Geological Survey, and an analysis of the EWG Action Fund. Quote, "Many Americans believe asbestos was banned years ago." The EWG analysis states, "The truth is, hundreds of thousands of pounds of asbestos enter the U.S. every year, according to an analyst of import data by the EWG Action Fund. Between 2006 and 2014, more than 8.2 million pounds of asbestos were imported to the United States, including raw asbestos, products containing asbestos, and hazardous asbestos waste," the EWD analysis said. The imports arrived at 23 ports on the Gulf of Mexico, West Coast, and Eastern Seaboard, including ports in New Orleans, Houston, Newark, and Long Beach, California. The figures are based on EWG's examination of federally traded records, including detailed bills of lading for goods arriving by ship from other countries. Why is Shikama interested in asbestos? You remember that house that I was going to repair and live in? But my aunt turned around and said, "Oh no, I'm not selling you the house. I'm only going to rent it to you," which was a horrible deal. And let me just reiterate why that deal was horrible. If I was renting the house, that means I had no control over the house, and I could not do with the house as I pleased, and I could not sell the house myself, right? So if I repaired that house and was simply renting the house, the very last day that the last nail had been hammered into place, my aunt could have evicted me within 30 days and taking a lump sum of about $100,000 away from the deal without spending a dime. How do you like that? Now, that house was built in 1966. The entire outside was shingles were asbestos. The paint was lead paint. All of the drywall inside was asbestos laden, and the popcorn ceiling was also asbestos. And it required by law licensed specialized removers to remove the asbestos. It is not something that a DIYer could do themselves. The imports of asbestos to the United States are part of a thriving worldwide trade in asbestos. As the Mesothelioma Cancer Alliance reported recently, global asbestos consumption is now about 2 million metric tons a year, and millions of people worldwide are being exposed on a daily basis. Though asbestos is now banned in 52 nations, dozens of countries still use, import, and export asbestos and asbestos-containing products. In addition to the United States, those countries are primarily developing nations in Asia and Eastern Europe that are desperate for industrial growth and often turn a blind eye to the health and environmental consequences of asbestos exposure. The worldwide trade has been enabled and led by a handful of powerful interests. For a long time, the Canadian asbestos lobby, and now the Russian asbestos producers, the Mesothelioma Cancer Alliance concluded. Though the imports to the United States represent only a tiny portion of the overall worldwide trade in asbestos, those fighting for a worldwide ban say the fact that asbestos is still legal and imports continue to America sends a message to developing nations that it's permissible to continue to import and use asbestos. Quote, "It is rather unbelievable that the country which has imported the most asbestos in the world, a country which possesses all the scientific knowledge about the hazards and human tragedy caused by asbestos, has not put an end to its use." Mark Hendry of the Paris-based French National Association of Asbestos Victims and DIVA tells Mesothelioma Cancer Alliance. He adds, "Edicting a ban on asbestos in the United States is necessary for at least two reasons. First, it is necessary to end this deadly trade and protect the American population. Second, it is a much needed message to countries still producing asbestos such as Russia, Brazil, Kazakhstan, and China, or using massively asbestos such as China, India, and Indonesia. Others say the United States policy on asbestos, or lack thereof, is part of the continuing debate over exploitation of the third world workers. Quote, "Regarding the lack of a ban in the United States in the face of bans elsewhere, I think it's very much akin to America's exporting of contaminated ships for breaking," says Ziegel. "Through inaction, we are continuing to condemn many of our children's children to death by asbestos-related diseases. This does not mean, conversely, that a U.S. ban would necessarily affect the policies of current exports and imports, but it does mean that we lack any standing in calling for better behavior by others. Asbestos consumption declining too slowly. To be sure, certain uses of asbestos has been banned in the United States and other restricted, and there has been a significant downward trend in asbestos use in the United States from the record high of 803,000 tons in 1973. In 2015, asbestos consumption in the United States States was estimated at 360 tons, according to the USGS. Quote, this decline has occurred because asbestos substitute, alternative materials, and new technology have displaced asbestos from traditional domestic markets, states the January 2016 USGS Mineral Commodity Summaries. But scientists and government agencies warn that any exposure to asbestos carries risk. Quote, there is no safe level of asbestos exposure for any type of asbestos fiber. The U.S. Occupational Safety and Health Administration states on its webpage, every occupational exposure to asbestos can cause injury or disease. Every occupational exposure contributes to the risk of getting asbestos-related diseases. The lead consumer of raw asbestos in the United States today is the chlor-alkali chemical industry, which uses asbestos to make diaphragm used in the manufacture of chlorine and sodium hydroxide. Do you know what that is? Automobile brakes for older cars and roofing materials marked for shipment to auto parts or building supply warehouses were among the asbestos-containing products imported into the United States between 2006 and 2014, according to the bills of lading examined by the EWG. Quote, although many professional and home mechanics believe asbestos brakes and clutches have been banned, they remain legal and can even be ordered from Amazon, the EWD analysis says. There is no way to know for sure, however, all the companies that use and all the products that contain asbestos. In 2007, Ziegel served as a product testing manufacturer for the ADAO research project that disclosed evidence of asbestos in certain household products, including window glazing, roof patch, spackling paste, duct tape, and a children's toy fingerprint kit imported from China. Ziegel says the presence of asbestos in household products and the public's lack of knowledge about it is a problem that persists to this day. Quote, our children are still being exposed. Women are being exposed in the home by various products, Ziegel says. We don't know because there's no regulation. Nothing that stops asbestos from being present in products. In an effort to give Americans the information that would allow them to avoid exposure to asbestos in workplaces, homes, and products, Senator Richard Durbin, Democrat of Illinois, and Representative Suzanne Delbin, Democrat of Washington, last year introduced legislation that would require companies that manufacture, import, or handle asbestos to annually inform the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, what products contain asbestos and where those products may be publicly accessible in communities around the country. The information would be made available online for the public to access under the legislation, which is known as the Reducing Exposure to Asbestos Database, READ Act. The legislation is pending, though its chance for a passage appears slim in a Republican-controlled Congress, insiders say. The administration of former President George H.W. Bush did attempt to ban asbestos. In 1989, the EPA issued a final rule banning most asbestos-containing products under the authority of the Toxic Substance Control Act, TSCA. But 2 years later, the EPA ban was overturned by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, a decision that established a precedent that has made it extremely difficult for EPA to ban any dangerous chemical. The administration decided not to appeal the court ruling. Quote, the primary reason asbestos remain legal is the woefully inadequate Federal Toxic Substance Control Act, TSCA, says Formuzos. Considered the weakest of the national environmental law, TSCA has allowed not only asbestos to remain legal, but has let tens of thousands of other toxic chemicals into the marketplace with little or no safety testing beforehand. 13 years after the asbestos ban in the United States was overturned, Paul Ziegel learned that he had mesothelioma. Since then, he has worked in many ways to protect current and future asbestos victims. Among other things, Ziegel has provided information to congressional committees in Washington, considered legislation dealing with asbestos, and spoken at conferences. He's written numerous letters to members of Congress pushing for a ban on asbestos, and he and his wife have counseled numerous asbestos patients and their families. He argues that the U.S. ban on asbestos makes sense from both a public health and a business perspective. Quote, I happen to believe, as a businessman, that a ban would make good business sense, he said, pointing out that high cost of medical care and lost work time alone has an overall economic impact on American families well into the billions of dollars per year. Nonetheless, a ban on asbestos in the United States doesn't appear imminent, and the long-term prospect for a ban likely depends on a sustained effort involving widespread public support and a changing political climate in Washington. Speaking of Washington, let's go back to George H.W. Bush. I want you to note the shifting majorities in Congress. It has not been a majority Republican since George H.W. Bush. It shifted back and forth, back and forth. That means both Republicans and Democrats have allowed asbestos to still not be banned in the U.S. Quote, it took years to get a UK United Kingdom ban in 1999, and that was only because the EU, European Union, ban was coming, says Laura Kazan-Allen, coordinator of the International Ban Asbestos Secretariat, the IBAS, which is based outside London. Our success in the UK was a result of long-term consensus building amongst a wide range of civil society groups, including asbestos victims, trade union, politicians, medics, campaigners, and others. The prospects for a ban on asbestos in the United States, at least in the short term, is not good, says the EWG's Formuzes. Congress is currently considering legislation to reform TSCA, but neither the House nor the Senate bills directly call for a ban on asbestos. Now, let me go back to all of those industries that are affected directly by asbestos exposure. Here's the problem. More than likely, a lot of the unions, a lot of the workers have no idea that they're actually being exposed to asbestos because there is absolutely no duty to report. Quote, beyond TSCA, however, if the President and Congress both support implementing a permanent ban on the importation of asbestos in the United States, it could happen, but it would likely require robust and sustained pressure from the American people to realize this goal, he says. That means that asbestos, the cancer, mesothelioma, would have to be known by the population first, and there is no duty to report as it stands now. Take, for example, the dangers of being fat and obesity in the United States. Let's say, just for a second, that understanding the calories on a fast food chart would somehow inform somebody who eats at McDonald's, for example, of how many calories they are consuming, because you really don't know how many thousands of calories you are consuming. Now, there was a lady that sued McDonald's and won, saying that McDonald's made her fat. What was the argument? Well, the defense was that there was no intention that the regular client would eat 3 times a day at McDonald's every day. That's the defense. But the prosecution, of course, comes back and says there is absolutely nothing anywhere that says that a client can't eat at McDonald's 3 times a day. And there's no indication of what's going on. You are simply handed food. There's no information that comes along with the food. So she won. Now, do you think maybe if people were informed about the caloric intake of McDonald's, of how many thousands of calories that they were getting, and the calories are in fact empty, that you're getting less than 1% of any sort of nutrition from anything on the menu at McDonald's, and any nutrition that you're actually getting from the food from McDonald's is completely overcome by all of the starches and sugars that are present inside of all of the food, including the salads. The salads are actually sprayed with sugar water to make them taste better. So even the people who are thinking that they are eating healthy at McDonald's are in fact making themselves fat. Now, I guarantee you all of the people who, when I started talking about McDonald's and I started talking about the lawsuit, said in their head, that lady is stupid. What reasonable person would go to McDonald's, eat there, and think that they are going to lose weight? Well, I'm sorry to tell you this, but What if the lady only ate salads? Would your ears perk up if the prosecution or the plaintiff in the case said, I only ate salads and drank bottled water at McDonald's and somehow I gained 150 pounds and I only ate at McDonald's. I didn't eat anywhere else and I only ate salads at McDonald's. That would probably chill your blood. Something is in the salad. Then it comes out that McDonald's is spraying the salads with sugar water to make them taste better. Why? So that it attracts people who are trying to be healthy to be dedicated to coming to McDonald's because their salads somehow taste better. I believe that is a normal practice in the industry, all the way from Subway to McDonald's. Subway, which you are told is eating healthy, and that Jared lost weight by eating sandwiches, big huge sandwiches with thousands of calories in them. Somehow he lost 200-300 pounds. That's advertising. That's marketing. Now, just with that information, if you were told that McDonald's sprays its salad with sugar water, a reasonable person would then completely stop eating any and everything at McDonald's. The very first step about asbestos is to be informed that it's even in stuff. Did you hear the list that I said? Go back and review the video. Did you hear the list that I said of the stuff that is still being produced, manufactured, and sold to the general public? Did you know that? Of course you didn't, because there is no duty to inform the public about that. And people are getting cancer, and the EPA says there is no safe exposure. So me being in that house, sweeping up that dust and coughing and coughing and coughing almost immediately. I mean, just from the dust alone probably, but I was exposed to asbestos in that house, along with a whole host of other probably toxins from the people cutting up the stuff and pulverizing it, trying to get at the wires and stuff, and me trying to sweep it up. Now, remember, I had absolutely no idea when I swept the house that there was asbestos present anywhere in the house. It wasn't until I took it upon myself to then invite and market that I had a project to general contractors that finally, after about the fourth general contractor, mentioned it. Hey, by the way, do you know you have asbestos all throughout this house? No, I didn't. Remember, there were three or four general contractors that came through, looked at the entire house, and didn't even mention it. How do you like them apples? Well, thank you for watching the Shikama Live Show. I hope this investigating report will open up your eyes and maybe put a bee in your bonnet to maybe write your congressman or write your senator or even write your local politicians to get this banned, because it's in your local area. It's not national, it's in your local area. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment and share it. Thank you.